Story 1. It was a soggy Thanksgiving in Tacoma, Washington. The kind of night where the rain never lets up, drumming on the roof like it's got something to prove. Our family's small, so our gatherings are more cozy than chaotic. Just me, Ethan Carter, my mom Linda, my older sister Emily, my younger sister Sarah, and our grandparents, George and Martha Wilson, all crammed into Mom's modest suburban house on a quiet street. The place isn't fancy, just a single story with a creaky front porch and a living room that smells faintly of old wood and cinnamon candles. Outside, the rain made everything feel cut off, like the rest of the world was on mute. You could barely see the neighbors' lights through the downpour, and the street was a blur of wet shadows. It gave the night this weird, tucked-away vibe, like we were the only ones left in Tacoma. Inside, though, it was warm and alive. Mom was in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, directing Emily and Sarah like a general as they mashed potatoes and stirred cranberry sauce. The smell of roasting turkey and fresh cornbread filled the house, mixing with the faint hum of the television in the living room. Grandpa George was parked in his favorite armchair, eyes glued to the Seahawks game, muttering about the refs like they could hear him. Grandma Martha shuffled in from the car earlier, her arms full of Tupperware packed with her famous green bean casserole, and now she was fussing over the table settings. Me, I was bouncing between helping in the kitchen and keeping Grandpa company, mostly because he'd tell me stories about his old football days if I sat long enough. We planned dinner for 6 o'clock sharp, same as every year, and by 5 o'clock, Grandma and Grandpa were already settled in, their coats dripping on the rack by the door. We'd had to guide them up the slick front steps, Mom holding Grandpa's arm, me shielding Grandma with an umbrella that barely kept the rain off. It was a mess out there. The kind of rain that soaks you to the bone in seconds and turns the porch into a skating rink. Once they were safe inside, the house felt like a little fortress against the storm. The football game blared, the oven beeped, and my sister's laughter spilled out from the kitchen. It was the kind of night when you feel wrapped up in family, like nothing could touch you. But there was something about the rain, the way it pounded the windows, that made the world outside feel watchful. I couldn't shake this tiny itch in the back of my mind, like the darkness beyond the glass was hiding something. Maybe it was just the weather, or maybe it was the way the street felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Mom's house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, backed by a thin strip of woods, and on nights like this, it's easy to feel like you're on an island. No one walks by in a storm like that. No one's supposed to. Yet every time I glanced at the front door, I half expected to see a shadow move across the frosted glass. It was silly, I told myself. Just the rain, playing tricks. Still, that feeling of being watched, of being cut off from everything else, clung to me like damp clothes. As we set the table and the clock ticked closer to 6 o'clock, the house buzzed with warmth, but the storm outside kept whispering that we weren't as safe as we thought. Right as we were settling around the dining table at 6 o'clock, plates piled high with turkey, lamb, and Grandma Martha's green bean casserole, the doorbell rang, sharp and out of place against the steady roar of the Tacoma rain. The whole room froze, forks halfway to mouths, like we'd all forgotten what a doorbell even sounded like. Mom's house in that quiet cul-de-sac didn't get random visitors, especially not in a downpour that could drown a fish. "Who's that now?" Grandpa George grumbled, squinting toward the door. Mom's face tightened, and she muttered, "Hope it's not some neighbor with a flooded basement." My sisters, Emily and Sarah, exchanged looks, and I felt that itch from earlier, the one that said the darkness outside was watching, crawl up my spine. Mom nodded at me. "Ethan, go check." I pushed back my chair, heart thudding harder than it should have, and walked to the front door, the rain hammering the porch awning so loud it swallowed my voice when I yelled, "Who's there?" No answer, just a muffled male voice lost in the storm. I cracked the door, keeping the storm door locked, and saw a guy in a bulky raincoat, hood up, face shadowed. He stepped closer, shouting something about being hungry, needing food, and the Lord will bless you if we helped. I don't know why, but Grandma's voice popped into my head, always saying we should help those in need. "1 sec," I called, shutting the door and jogging to the living room. I told Mom and Grandma about the guy, and while Mom looked skeptical, Grandma insisted, "Give him something, Ethan." So I grabbed some paper plates from the kitchen, layered them to keep the rain from ruining everything, and piled on leftovers, turkey, potatoes, a scoop of stuffing. Back at the door, I held up the plate to show him, but he lunged, yanking at the storm door's handle. My stomach dropped. "Wait, it's locked!" I shouted, but he kept pulling, eyes glinting under his hood. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door, thinking I'd just hand it over quickly. The second I pushed it open, he shoved hard, trying to force his way inside. I threw the plate, food scattering across the porch, and braced against him, yelling for Emily. She sprinted over, and as we wrestled to shut the door, I saw 2 more figures darting up the walkway through the rain, shadows moving too fast to be random. My blood ran cold. We slammed the door, locked it, and I bolted to the back door, checking it was secure. The house felt like a trap now, the rain sealing us in with whatever was out there. Mom was on the phone with the police, her voice shaky, while Sarah clung to Grandma, who was whispering prayers. I paced, peering out windows, but the storm made it impossible to see much. Just wet darkness and the faint glow of streetlights. It felt like those guys were circling us, waiting for a weak spot. When the police finally pulled up, their lights cutting through the rain, the men were gone. The scattered food still lay on the porch, soggy and untouched, proof they weren't here for a meal. We were safe, but the what-ifs haunted us. Mom ordered a doorbell camera the next day, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the rain had hidden something worse than we'd ever know, lurking just beyond the porch light. Story 2. It was Thanksgiving in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the city was buzzing with that pre-holiday glow, but all I wanted was to sink into the warmth of my parents' house in the suburbs, just outside Uptown. I'm Olivia Bennett, and our family gatherings are the kind where everyone's laughing over old stories, plates overflowing with food, and the television humming with football in the background. Mom, Susan, was in her element, piling the table with turkey, cornbread, and her famous pecan pie, while Dad, David, cracked jokes with my cousins I hadn't seen in months. My Grandma Evelyn was there too, fussing about the gravy, her voice cutting through the chatter. The house, a cozy 2-story with big windows and a wraparound porch, felt like a safe haven, the kind of place where the world's problems couldn't touch you. Outside, Charlotte's skyline twinkled in the distance, but the neighborhood was quiet, tucked away from the city's hustle. Inside, the smell of roasted herbs and candle wax wrapped around us, and for a while, everything was perfect. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket, a long text from an unknown number, and my stomach twisted. I slipped it out, glancing at the screen. "Hey Olivia, hope your Thanksgiving's going great." My heart sank. It was Ryan Mitchell, this guy I'd matched with on a dating app months ago. We texted for a bit, but he gave off clingy, obsessive vibes, so I politely shut it down, saying we weren't a match. That's when he got weird. Angry after dinner, I said my goodbyes and drove back to my uptown apartment, a ground floor unit in a 2-family house I shared with my roommate, Mia Thompson. The city was alive with holiday lights, but my street felt oddly still, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every sound. My apartment was small but homey, with fairy lights strung across the living room and a couch piled with blankets. Mia was still out with her family, so I had the place to myself. I locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and curled up in my bedroom, flipping on a cheesy Christmas rom-com to unwind. The glow of the television filled the room, but the windows stayed dark, reflecting only my own face back at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan's text wasn't just a one-off, that he was out there somewhere, piecing together my life from the scraps I'd accidentally left online. The apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt exposed, like the walls were too thin to keep the world out. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside, made me glance at the door, half expecting to see a silhouette. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew I wasn't alone in the dark. I was halfway through that cheesy Christmas rom-com the glow of the television barely keeping the darkness at bay in my uptown Charlotte apartment, when my phone buzzed again, another text from a random number. My heart sank. It was Ryan Mitchell, the guy who wouldn't leave me alone, spewing another essay of insults and veiled threats, acting like he owned me. I typed a quick reply, "If you keep contacting me, I'm calling the police," and hit send, my hand shaking. I tried to focus on the movie, but the words felt hollow, like the apartment's walls were closing in. Then my phone rang, with unknown caller. I knew it was him. I silenced it, my pulse racing, and turned up the television, hoping to drown out the dread. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the living room, slow and deliberate, not the usual creaks of an old building. My stomach dropped. Mia, my roommate, wasn't due back tonight, and I always locked the front door. I paused the movie, the silence screaming in my ears, and listened as the footsteps moved closer, stopping right outside my bedroom door. The knob rattled, once, twice, then stopped. I froze, barely breathing. I'd locked my door out of habit, thank God, but the thought of someone in my apartment made my skin crawl. Mia? I called, voice barely a whisper, but there was no answer, just the faint sound of steps retreating. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling, and saw a new text from another random number. "Good thing you made it obvious where you live." My blood ran cold. I dialed Mia 5 times, no answer. Panic took over, and I called my dad, David, whispering that I thought Ryan was in the house. "Stay put, I'm coming," he said, and I could hear his car keys jangling as he ran out the door. He lived 10 minutes away, but it felt like forever. Me huddled on my bed, clutching the phone, every creak sounding like a threat. When Mia finally called back, she confirmed she wasn't home. She was staying with her family. It wasn't her. My dad made it in 5 minutes, tires screeching in the driveway. I crept to the front door to let him in, my legs like jelly. We searched the apartment, and that's when he found it. The big sliding window by the kitchen, wide open, rain pooling on the floor. He gave me this look, disappointment mixed with fear, and said, "Liv, you've got to lock this every night." I swore I wasn't imagining the footsteps, but the place was empty now, just the echo of my own panic. I grabbed a bag and went home with Dad, sleeping in my old room, the safety of my parents' house, barely calming my nerves. The next morning, Dad drove me to the county courthouse in Charlotte. We filed for a temporary restraining order against Ryan, his threatening texts more than enough to convince the judge. I saw him once weeks later at a hearing to extend the order. He didn't say a word, just stared, but the judge granted the extension. I could never prove he broke in that night, but I didn't need to. Those texts were proof of his obsession. Back at the apartment, I got a deadbolt and started triple checking every window. The fear lingered though, like a stain I couldn't scrub out. Ryan was out there, and I couldn't shake the feeling he was still watching, waiting for me to slip up again. Story 3. It was Thanksgiving at my Uncle Jack Turner's place on Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia, where the water stretches wide and the woods creep close, making you feel like you're a world away from everything. I'm Mason Turner, and our family's the type to go all out for holidays, especially when Uncle Jack's hosting. His house isn't some fancy lakefront mansion, just a sturdy, rustic place, with a big deck and a gazebo out back, perfect for the kind of rowdy get-togethers we love. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and grilled meat, and by 3 p.m., the party was in full swing. Uncle Jack, a bit of a rough-around-the-edges guy with a loud laugh, had coolers stuffed with beer, a Bluetooth speaker blasting country tunes, and a cornhole game going strong. My dad, Robert, was tossing back drinks with my cousin Dylan, while Aunt Karen buzzed around, setting out chips and dip. I was in on the action, playing cards, shooting hoops with Dylan, and soaking up the chaos. The lake glittered under the afternoon sun, but the woods beyond the yard were dark, thick with shadows that seemed to watch us. It's the kind of place where you feel free but exposed, like the trees are hiding secrets. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange, Aunt Karen and Uncle Jack started hauling food to the gazebo. Turkey, mashed potatoes, collard greens, the works. We all gathered under the string lights, their soft glow pushing back the dusk. By 6 o'clock, it was pitch black beyond the gazebo, the lake and woods swallowing any light. Uncle Jack loved doing Thanksgiving outside, said it felt right, and we all went along with it, laughing over plates piled high. But there was something about the darkness pressing in, the way the music echoed into the void, that made the hair on my neck prickle. Smith Mountain Lake is remote. Neighbors are few, and no one just wanders by. The nearest house was a good half-mile down a gravel road, and the quiet of the countryside felt heavy, like it was waiting for something to break it. I kept glancing at the tree line, catching myself wondering what was out there. It was stupid, I thought. Just the beer, and the night playing tricks. Still, the gazebo felt like a tiny island of light in a sea of black, and every rustle from the woods made me shift in my seat. Uncle Jack was telling some loud story about his hunting days, and Dad was egging him on, but I couldn't shake the sense that we were being watched, like eyes were peering from the shadows, sizing us up. The lake lapped softly against the shore, a steady rhythm that should have been calming, but wasn't. It was like the night itself was holding its breath, and we were too caught up in our own noise to notice. As we ate, the lights flickered once, just enough to make Aunt Karen glance up, and I caught Dylan scanning the darkness, his grin fading for a second. We were out here, exposed, with nothing but a flimsy gazebo roof and a few bulbs between us and whatever the night was hiding. The party kept going, but that feeling of being small, of being seen, clung to me, whispering that our little patch of light wasn't as safe as we thought. We were deep into Thanksgiving dinner under the gazebo at Uncle Jack's place on Smith Mountain Lake, the string lights casting a warm glow, but the darkness beyond felt like it was closing in. I'm Mason Turner, and that night the vibe shifted fast. My cousin Dylan suddenly froze, pointing past me toward the woods. "Dad, who's that?" he said, his voice low. We all turned, and there, at the edge of the tree line, was a figure, just standing there, still as a statue, watching us eat. My gut twisted. Uncle Jack, half a beer deep, stood up, squinting into the dark. "Who the hell's that?" he barked, stomping toward the guy. He got maybe halfway when the figure turned and bolted into the woods. Jack laughed it off, stumbling back to the table, saying, "Probably some local weirdo." But Aunt Karen's face was tight, and I felt it too. This wasn't funny. The lake and trees around us swallowed sound, making the night feel like a trap. We tried to keep eating, but then I spotted him again, closer to the lake this time, just standing there. I pointed, and Uncle Jack shot up, pissed now, marching toward the guy, yelling, "You got a problem?" The figure vanished into the trees again, but then Dylan whispered, "There's another one." On the opposite side of the yard, another shadow stood, unmoving. My dad, Robert, and I stood up, ready to back Jack, but the second guy slipped away too. The air felt heavy, like we were being circled. We decided to clear the table, hauling food and plates inside, and the party vibe was dead. Inside Uncle Jack's living room, we huddled, the outside lights still on, but the windows showed nothing but black. I volunteered to grab more beers from the cooler by the gazebo, but stepping outside, I felt eyes on me. The gazebo light was off now, and the darkness pressed in, thick and alive. I grabbed the beers, heart pounding, when I heard a chair scrape across the concrete under the gazebo. I spun around. A tall figure, maybe 6'5", was moving around the table, his shape barely visible. I yelled for Uncle Jack, sprinting back to the house. Jack and Dad rushed out, but then a loud bang came from the side of the house, like someone was slamming the siding. Fear hit me hard. Jack and Dad looked scared too, and that made it worse. We locked the door, Aunt Karen yanking curtains shut, like we could block out whatever was out there. It felt like the house was surrounded, the woods hiding God knows how many people. Uncle Jack, who who never calls the cops, dialed 911, his voice low and urgent. We waited, every creak making us jump, until a deafening crash shattered the kitchen window. Aunt Karen screamed, and we found a brick on the floor, a note tied to it. "Leave now." My blood ran cold. The police arrived minutes later, their siren cutting the tension. They searched but found no one. Just the brick, the note, and Uncle Jack's Trump flag missing from the yard, hinting at some political grudge. We were safe, but the fear stuck, like the night had marked us. The lake and woods felt alive, watching, waiting. We stayed inside, lights on, knowing we'd been targeted, powerless against the shadows that knew exactly where we were.